The National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, ensures environmental impacts are considered for all federal actions. A federal action can be federal funding, a federal permit, federal approval, or other federal activities required for a project. All requests for environmental reviews, or RERs, have federal funding through the Federal Highway Administration. MoDOT administers the NEPA process and oversees the NEPA reviews for all LPA projects. NEPA consists of three types of environmental classifications: categorical exclusion, environmental assessment, and environmental impact statement. A categorical exclusion 2 has environmental impacts that are between a categorical exclusion and an environmental assessment and requires additional documentation in the RER. The programmatic agreement between FHWA and MoDOT for processing actions classified as categorical exclusions for federal aid highway projects defines the thresholds for a categorical exclusion and categorical exclusion 2. 97% of RERs are categorical exclusion classifications, with 5% CE2 classifications. NEPA is a procedural law about an information process. It regulates an agency's decision-making process, not the decision. NEPA is not meant to dictate what the LPA ultimately decides to do in their project, but is intended to document the NEPA decision-making process. NEPA does not force an LPA to make a specific decision. As recipients of federal funds, an LPA must first disclose any environmental consequences and evaluate alternatives that would avoid or lessen a project's impact before proceeding with final design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction. FHWA's policy is that the NEPA decision-making process be open and collaborative, with full disclosure of the steps taken. Therefore, documentation, government agency coordination, and public involvement are essential elements of NEPA. FHWA is the final authority when determining NEPA compliance, and MoDOT ensures that NEPA compliance is documented. It is essential MoDOT is engaged early and throughout a project's development. A request for environmental review, or RER, is submitted by the local public agency, or LPA, or its consultant on the MoDOT Environmental Services website. The RER documents the project's resource impacts, and the Environmental Services website tracks the RER documentation. Instructions for using the Environmental Services website are provided in the instructions link at the top of the Environmental Services webpage. The LPA sponsors or consultant must first register to use the RER system. Sponsors and consultants can choose individuals to list as project contacts in the RER system. The RER system provides automatic email notifications to these contacts when the sponsor or consultant submits the RER to MoDOT, when MoDOT reviews environmental resource sections, when permits, clearances, and attachments are uploaded to the RER, and when MoDOT environmentally clears a project. Every LPA project requires the submission of an RER form, which is part of MoDOT's online system for tracking and documenting NEPA for LPA projects. The RER is used for all LPA projects and all NEPA classifications. The RER form allows the sponsor or consultant to provide any known environmental concerns or sensitive areas to make MoDOT aware. When the sponsor or consultant initially submits an RER, it should include at a minimum a project location map and project plans if they are applicable to a project or when they become available. Borrow material from a site not included in original project limits must have environmental clearance. While this is usually done by the contractor does not use the RER system for borrow site permits. The contractor provides necessary permits to the district. The contractor should contact the district if they are unsure about which permits are required. Once the RER is submitted by the sponsor or consultant, MoDOT staff receives an email notification, which begins MoDOT's 30-day review period. MoDOT staff assesses project impacts for each environmental resource section and provides instructions on how to proceed. As permits and clearances are received, the sponsor or consultant uploads these to the RER for MoDOT review. MoDOT staff clears each environmental resource section, assigns a NEPA classification, provides right-of-way permission, and ultimately clears the project. MoDOT does not obtain permits or clearances for LPA projects. However, MoDOT does have oversight of the sponsor's Section 106 and threatened and endangered species processes and compliance. NEPA classification is required prior to receiving an A date. To receive NEPA classification, the RER resource sections for cultural resources, threatened and endangered species, Section 4F, and noise must be cleared by MoDOT. Public involvement must also be completed. All environmental clearances are required prior to bid advertisement. The LPA should request that MoDOT re-evaluate the RER if there are proposed design changes, changes in project limits, or changes in environmental impacts. Contact MoDOT if a re-evaluation is necessary or if you are unsure if a re-evaluation is needed. MoDOT will assist in determining which resources may require further evaluation and the process and documentation needed for re-evaluation. Engage the public early and throughout the project. Identify stakeholders, including supports and opponents. These may include residents, businesses, government, schools, churches, law enforcement, emergency responders, civic groups, and nonprofits. Build excitement for the project and be open to ideas from the public. Let the public know you hear them and consider their comments and concerns. Determine the best method for outreach and obtaining public input. This may include public meetings, press releases, social media, flyers, or a project website. Consider COVID-19 or local issues that may limit attendance. Virtual meetings may be needed. Public comment periods are typically 2 weeks and may include comments received via email, online comment forums, or regular mail. Document the public involvement process through public notice, a project website link, displays, written public comments, and LPA resources. Take steps to incorporate any concerns or needs from the public into the project. There are many resources to help LPAs develop the RER documentation. The primary information source is MoDOT's Environmental Policy Guide, or EPG, which includes the EPG section 136.6 for environmental and cultural requirements. This EPG environmental and cultural section has information needed to describe the RER resources categories. Within the RER system are instructions that describe how to use the RER system and the information needed. A link to the instructions is included at the top of the RER system page. Additional resources include a consultant, MoDOT environmental staff, the MoDOT district liaison, and instructions provided later in this slide presentation. The primary stakeholders in the RER process are the Federal Highway Administration, MoDOT, the LPA, and often a consultant. The Federal Highway Administration approves, verifies, and oversees NEPA compliance, while MoDOT administers the NEPA process and oversees the NEPA reviews for all LPA projects. The LPA receives FHWA funding for its transportation project and is required to provide the necessary resource information to evaluate environmental and cultural impacts. A consultant is often hired to aid the LPA in providing the necessary documentation and to communicate with MoDOT on the LPA's behalf. Following an LPA's notification of award, an RER should be submitted as soon as possible, but no more than 180 days after award. Delays can occur for a variety of reasons and often cannot be anticipated until RER resource information is provided. Common constraints to NEPA approval and right-of-way permissions include threatened and endangered species, cultural resources, public lands, and public involvement. Coordination with outside agencies, including U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, MDNR SHPO, and Missouri State Parks, can increase the timeline. Submitting the RER early, before any substantial work is completed, can save time and money by allowing MoDOT environmental specialists to provide input on what is needed. Providing accurate information early in the process can minimize potential delays and allow for early agency coordination. The Request for Environmental Review, or RER, contains 13 resource categories and the NEPA classification section. Each of the 13 resource categories must be reviewed and cleared by MoDOT cultural or environmental staff. For a description of each regulatory requirement and required information, click on the resource category.